taking possession of? How do we let go of something that perhaps maybe you are responsible for? But let me let you hear this, because the breakthrough came one day when he took a notebook and he ventured into a forest not far from where he lived, and he walked through the woods. He could feel his muscles starting to relax. He found a place of peace. Sitting down under the tree, he sighed and he felt at ease for the first time in months. Taking out his notebook, he decided to let go of the burdens of his life. And so he wrote a letter to God and simply said, "Dear God, today I hereby resign as general manager of the universe. Love, George." Now looking back at that moment, he reflected with a twinkle in his eye and said, "A wonder of wonders. God accepted my resignation." Many of us, I've been saying this over the week, so you've heard it, I've primed you for this. Many of us, we need to resign as the general manager of the universe. Many of us need to resign from the fact that we can't control people. Are you hearing what I'm telling you? We can't. Listen, people are out of control, that's true, but we cannot control them. We don't have the ability. We can influence them, amen? We can encourage them. Sometimes, if they'll allow you, you can take them by the hand. You know, you've heard the proverbial saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, but you can drown that horse. Yes. I mean, are you worn out from trying to help your children and your grandchildren take care of your parents and get your co-workers shaped up? Are you exhausted from trying to repair the broken people and the messed up situations around you? No wonder you're tired all the time. The first person that you need to work on is the one you see in the mirror every morning.
Yes, amen.
The first person you need to be honest with is the one you see in the mirror every morning, the one that you wake up with every morning. You need to realize that you're not fooling God. You might fool people around you. You might even not be fooling them too good, but people are walking on eggshells, so they're not really going to tell you too much because they're afraid of what might come out of it. I heard a preacher mention one time a plaque that was hanging on the wall of his office. And the plaque said this. It said, "Do not feel totally, personally, irrevocably responsible for everything." Listen, this is what it said. Don't feel totally, personally, irrevocably responsible for everything. That's my job. Love God. God is responsible for everything. Amen. Interesting enough, though, did you know that He can't truly control everyone?
That's right. Amen.
He is sovereign. He's the ruler of the universe. But He can't force you. Neither will He force you. Mm-mm. See, that caught my eye because it reminds me of a law that I read someplace, and it's a principle law. It's called the first law of spiritual life. Here, let me give you this. If it's not in your bulletin, you need to write it down. Here's the first law of a spiritual life. He's God, we're not. Now, if you understand that truth, you don't have to take on the responsible burdens that God should and could only handle Himself. Amen? Amen. Remember, He's God, we're not. A few years ago, there was a movie called Rudy. Anybody ever see that movie, Rudy? And there's a scene where there's a young man, he despairs of ever making the Notre Dame football team. He's too small, too slow, too weak, and in every way he fails to meet the challenge. He's totally discouraged. He goes to the priest and he asks if he will ever make the team. And the priest smiles and says to that 35-year-old that he has learned only two things for certain. First, there is a God, and second, I'm not Him. Amen. Christmas is important. Amen. It's important for a lot of reasons. Amen. But among other things, it reminds us that we're not in charge. Christmas reminds us we are not in charge. And that's always a good thing to remember. I mean, as I look towards the end, of this year, and I look back, actually, a story came to mind. There was a friend of mine who was talking about looking back over this last year and all the things that he went through. And after the year before, you know what year that was, the pandemic, which apparently is still going on. Maybe not, it's not as much of a rage as it has been, but it's still something serious. But he remembered that he finally got released and was able to go out west, and he went to one of his favorite places, and he was going to take a bike ride. Now this was in January, it was a cold day. He said that it was a clear day, and even though there was a little bit of snow on the ground in the state that he was in, that he felt that the trail would still be clear. So he gets there, and here's what he says. He says, Brother Tony said, look, I get there. He said, my first clue should have been there were no other cars in the parking lot. I was the only one there. He said, that should have been a sign to me right there. I mean, all the smart people were somewhere else that day. This day he's there. So he got his bike out, he rode down the trail, and there was some ice here and there, but he managed to make a round without any trouble. And he said, I was right about 3 miles in, and there was a small patch of ice that I was coming to. He said, I thought I could ride over it. Anybody ever try to have a bicycle when you were a kid and thought you could ride over ice?
On the river.
So anyway, you kind of know where this is going. Now, he was one of these guys, he's kind of a bit of a fanatic. I mean, he's got this sports bike, and he's got these shoes that clip in, so you can't, your feet don't come off the stirrups or whatever. And so anyway, he says he made it up to the ice, and he says, and everything happened so fast, he could not disconnect his feet from the bike. And so he went down. I mean, he said it happened so fast. And he said, I turned my head just in time to see my ankle going a way that it's not supposed to go.
Ow.
And he said, Brother Tony said, I got to tell you, it'd be like one of those scenes that you see on a sportscast where they tell you that they're going to show an injury from a football player. They say, you might want to look away from the scene. And anyway, so the bottom line is he broke his leg. Where was everybody else? There was nobody. Fortunately, he had a cell phone. The paramedics had come. They stabilized his leg. And eventually he had 3 surgeries to try to get things put back together. And they did get things put back together. But he ended up in what he called the BBR. That's called the bed, bathroom, and recliner for 3 months. That's the only place he was able to go. I mean, he learned how to use a walker, and then later on, some of you will appreciate this, the knee scooter. He learned how to use a scooter, and he got better with time. And so again, later on that very next spring, he was out, he was able to ride his bike again. He had recovered quite a bit of strength, but he's got some hardware in his leg. It's probably gonna be there forever. Anyway, there's someplace I'm going with this story. Of course, he did say he can't run anymore, but then he also said he couldn't run very fast anyway. So not much loss there. So he said he shared all that when he shared the story with me, and it actually was kind of leading up to what we're talking about right now. He told me, he said he was in this meeting. It was a big ministerial meeting he was going to, and he was going to be speaking there. And while he was at the luncheon preparing for the meeting, one of the older, the seniors in the group, said, hey, what has God taught you through this accident? And he said something like this. He said, I have learned how completely unimportant I am. Because for 3 months I was laid up and the world just got along fine without me. I even wondered about the ministry that I led, but it kept right on going. Everything seemed to be just fine, and maybe even better because I was laid up. We all like to feel indispensable.
Amen.
As if the world can't get along without us. But in the words of Charles de Gaulle, history lesson today, in the words of Charles de Gaulle, you know what he said? There are graveyards filled with indispensable men.
Amen.
Now that's a thought worthy of some reflection. We might not be as important as we think we are, but it's humbling to think and realize that the world is spinning along just fine before we showed up, and it's going to keep on spinning after we're gone.
Amen.
And for that matter, God was doing, listen, God was doing just fine